Volume 3, Part 7 of Herodotus' Histories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Histories, Volume 3, by Herodotus of Halicarnassus, translated by E.D. Godley, Part 7. So the spies were sent back after they had seen all and returned to Europe. After sending the spies, those of the Greeks who had sworn alliance against the Persian next sent messengers to Argos. Now this is what the Argives say of their own part in the matter. They were informed from the first that the foreigner was stirring up war against Hellas. When they learned that the Greeks would attempt to gain their aid against the Persian, they sent messengers to Delphi to inquire of the god how it would be best for them to act, for 6,000 of them had been lately slain by a Lacedaemonian army, and Cleomenes, son of Anaxandrides, its general. For this reason, they said, the messengers were sent. The priestess gave this answer to their question: "Hated by your neighbors, dear to the immortals, crouch with a lance in rest, like a warrior fenced in his armor, guarding your head from the blow, and the head will shelter the body." This answer had already been uttered by the priestess when the envoys arrived in Argos, and entered the council chamber to speak as they were charged. Then the Argives answered to what had been said they would do as was asked of them if they might first make a 30 years' peace with Lacedaemonia, and if the command of half the allied power were theirs. It was their right to have the full command, but they would nevertheless be content with half. This, they say, was the answer of their council, although the oracle forbade them to make the alliance with the Greeks. Furthermore, they, despite their fear of the oracle, were eager to secure a 30 years' treaty, so that their children might have time in those years to grow to be men. If there were to be no such treaty, so they reasoned, then, after the evil that had befallen them, the Persians should deal them yet another blow, it was to be feared that they would be at the Lacedaemonians' mercy. Then those of the envoys who were Spartans replied to the demands of the council, saying that they would refer the question of the truce to their own government at home. As for the command, however, they themselves had been commissioned to say that the Spartans had 2 kings, and the Argives but one. Now it was impossible to deprive either Spartan of his command, but there was nothing to prevent the Argive from having the same right of voting as their 2 had. At that, say the Argives, they decided that the Spartans' covetousness was past all bearing, and that it was better to be ruled by the foreigners than give way to the Lacedaemonians. They then bade the envoys depart from the land of Argos before sunset, for they would otherwise be treated as enemies. Such is the Argives' account of this matter, but there is another story told in Hellas, namely that before Xerxes set forth on his march against Hellas, he sent a herald to Argos, who said on his coming, so the story goes, "Men of Argos, this is the message to you from King Xerxes. Persis our forefather had, as we believe, Perseus son of Danae for his father, and Andromeda daughter of Cepheus for his mother. If that is so, then we are descended from your nation. In all right and reason we should therefore neither march against the land of our forefathers, nor should you become our enemies by aiding others, or do anything but abide by yourselves in peace. If all goes as I desire, I will hold none higher in esteem than you." The Argives were strongly moved when they heard this, and although they made no promise immediately and demanded no share, they later, when the Greeks were trying to obtain their support, did make the claim, because they knew that the Lacedaemonians would refuse to grant it, and that they would thus have an excuse for taking no part in the war. This is borne out, some of the Greeks say, by the tale of a thing which happened many years afterwards. It happened that while Athenian envoys, Callias son of Hipponicus, and the rest who had come up with him were at Susa, called the Memnonian, about some other business, the Argives also had at this same time sent envoys to Susa, asking of Xerxes' son, Artaxerxes, whether the friendship which they had forged with Xerxes still held good, as they desired, or whether he considered them as his enemies. Artaxerxes replied to this that it did indeed hold good, and that he believed no city to be a better friend to him than Argos. Now whether it is true that Xerxes sent a herald with such a message to Argos, and that the Argive envoys came up to Susa and questioned Artaxerxes about their friendship, I cannot say with exactness, nor do I now declare that I consider anything true, except what the Argives themselves say. This, however, I know full well, namely, if all men should carry their own private troubles to market for barter with their neighbours, there would not be a single one who, when he had looked into the troubles of other men, would not be glad to carry home again what he had brought. The conduct of the Argives was accordingly not utterly shameful. As for myself, although it is my business to set down that which is told me, to believe it is none at all of my business. This I ask the reader to hold true for the whole of my history, for there is another tale current, according to which it would seem that it was the Argives who invited the Persian into Hellas, because the war with the Lacedaemonians was going badly, and they would prefer anything to their present distresses. Such is the end of the story of the Argives. As for Sicily, envoys were sent there by the allies to hold converse with Gelon, Syagrius from Lacedaemon among them. The ancestor of this Gelon, who settled at Gela, was from the island of Telos which lies off Triopium. When the founding of Gela by Antiphemus and the Lydians of Rhodes was happening, he would not be left behind. His descendants in time became and continue to be priests of the goddesses of the underworld. This office had been won, as I will show, by Tellines, one of their forefathers. There were certain Geloans who had been worsted in party strife and had been banished to the town of Mactorium, inland of Gela. These men Tellines brought to Gela with no force of men, but only the holy instruments of the goddesses worshipped to aid him. From where he got these, and whether or not they were his own invention, I cannot say. However that may be, it was in reliance upon them that he restored the exiles, on the condition that his descendants should be ministering priests of the goddesses. Now it makes me marvel that Tellines should have achieved such a feat, for I have always supposed that such feats cannot be performed by any man, but only by such as have a stout heart and manly strength. Tellines, however, is reported by the dwellers in Sicily to have had a soft and effeminate disposition. At the death of Cleandrus son of Pantares, who had been tyrant of Gela for 7 years, and had been slain by a man of that city named Sabilis, the sovereignty passed to Cleandrus's brother Hippocrates. While Hippocrates was a tyrant, Gelon, a descendant of the ministering priest Tellines, was one of Hippocrates's guard, as were Anicedemus son of Patacus, and many others. In no time he was appointed for his worth to be captain of the entire cavalry, for his performance had been preeminent while he served under Hippocrates in the assaults against Calopolis, Naxos, Zancla, Leontini, Syracuse, and many other of the foreigners' towns. None of these cities, with the exception of Syracuse, escaped enslavement by Hippocrates. The Syracusans were defeated in battle on the river Elorus. They were, however, rescued by the Corinthians and Corcyraeans, who made a peace for them on the condition that the Syracusans should deliver up to Hippocrates Camarina, which had formerly been theirs. When Hippocrates, too, after reigning the same number of years as his brother Cleandrus, came to his end near the town of Hybla, from where he had marched against the Sicels, then Gelon made a pretence of serving the cause of Hippocrates' sons Euclides and Cleandrus, whose rule the citizens would no longer bear. When he had defeated the men of Gela, however, he deposed the sons of Hippocrates and held sway himself. After this stroke of good fortune, Gelon brought back from the town of Casmina to Syracuse both the so-called landed gentry of Syracuse, who had been driven into exile by the common people, and their slaves, the Silurians. He then took possession of that city also, for the Syracusan common people surrendered themselves and it to Gelon at his coming. When he had made Syracuse his own, he took less account of his rule over Gela, which he gave in charge to his brother Hero. Over Syracuse he reigned, and all his care was for Syracuse. Straightway that city grew and became great, for not only did Gelon bring all the people of Camarina to Syracuse, and give them its citizenship, raising the township of Camarina, but he did the same thing to more than half of the townsmen of Gela, and when the Megarians in Sicily surrendered to him on terms after a siege, he took the wealthier of them, who had made war on him and expected to be put to death for this, and brought them to Syracuse to be citizens there. As for the common people of Megara, who had had no hand in the making of that war and expected that no harm would be done to them, these too he brought to Syracuse and sold them for slaves to be taken out of Sicily. He dealt in a similar way with the Euboeans of Sicily, making the same distinction. The reason for his treating the people of both places in this way was that he held the common people to be exceedingly disagreeable to live with. By these means Gelon had grown to greatness as a tyrant, and now, when the Greek envoys had come to Syracuse, they had audience with him and spoke as follows: "The Lacedaemonians and their allies have sent us to win your aid against the foreigner; for it cannot be, we think, that you have no knowledge of the Persian invader of Hellas, how he proposes to bridge the Hellespont and lead all the hosts of the East from Asia against us, making an open show of marching against Athens, but actually with intent to subdue all Hellas to his will. Now you are rich in power, and as lord of Sicily you rule what is not the least part of Hellas; therefore, we beg of you, send help to those who are going to free Hellas, and aid them in so doing. The uniting of all those of Greek stock entails the mustering of a mighty host able to meet our invaders in the field. If, however, some of us play false and others will not come to our aid, while the sound part of Hellas is but small, then it is to be feared that all Greek lands alike will be destroyed. Do not for a moment think that if the Persian defeats us in battle and subdues us, he will leave you unassailed, but rather look well to yourself before that day comes. Aid us, and you champion your own cause. In general, a well laid plan leads to a happy issue." This is what they said, and Gelon, speaking very vehemently, said in response to this: "Men of Hellas, it is with a self-seeking plea that you have dared to come here and invite me to be your ally against the foreigners; yet what of yourselves? When I was at odds with the Carchedonians, and asked you to be my comrades against a foreign army, and when I desired that you should avenge the slaying of Dorius son of Anaxandrides on the men of Egesta, and when I promised to free those trading ports from which great advantage and profit have accrued to you, then neither for my sake would you come to aid, nor to avenge the slaying of Dorius. Because of your position in these matters, all these lands lie beneath the foreigners' feet. Let that be, for all ended well, and our state was improved. But now that the war has come round to you in your turn, it is time for remembering Gelon. Despite the fact that you slighted me, I will not make an example of you. I am ready to send to your aid 200 triremes, 20,000 men at arms, 2,000 horsemen, 2,000 archers, 2,000 slingers, and 2,000 light armed men to run with horsemen. I also pledge to furnish provisions for the whole Greek army until we have made an end of the war. All this, however, I promise on one condition, that I shall be general and leader of the Greeks against the foreigner. On no other condition will I come myself or send others." When Syagrius heard that, he could not contain himself. "In truth," he cried, "loudly would Agamemnon son of Pelops lament, when hearing that the Spartans had been bereft of their command by Gelon and his Syracusans. No, rather, put the thought out of your minds that we will give up the command to you. If it is your will to aid Hellas, know that you must obey the Lacedaemonians; but if, as I think, you are too proud to obey, then send no aid." Thereupon Gelon, seeing how unfriendly Syagrius' words were, for the last time declared his opinion to them: "My Spartan friend, the hard words that a man hears are likely to arouse his anger, but for all the arrogant tenor of your speech, you will not move me to make an unseemly answer. When you set such store by the command, it is but reasonable that it should be still more important to me, since I am the leader of an army many times greater than yours, and more ships by far. But seeing that your response to me is so haughty, we will make some concession in our original condition. It might be that you should command the army, and I the fleet, or if it is your pleasure to lead by sea, then I am ready to take charge of the army. With that you will surely be content, unless you want to depart from here without such allies as we are." Such was Gelon's offer, and the Athenian envoys answered him before the Lacedaemonian could speak. "King of the Syracusans," he said, "Hellas sends us to ask you not for a leader but for an army. You, however, say no word of sending an army without the condition of your being the leader of Hellas. It is the command alone that you desire. Now as long as you sought the leadership of the whole force, we Athenians were content to hold our peace, knowing that the Laconian was well able to answer for both of us. But since failing to win the whole, you would gladly command the fleet, we want to let you know how the matter stands. Even if the Laconians should permit you to command it, we would not do so, for the command of the fleet, which the Lacedaemonians do not desire for themselves, is ours. If they should desire to lead it, we would not withstand them, but we will not allow any one else to be admiral. It would be for nothing, then, that we possess the greatest number of seafaring men in Hellas, if we Athenians yield our command to Syracusans, we who can demonstrate the longest lineage of all, and who alone among the Greeks have never changed our place of habitation. Of our stock too was the man of whom the poet Homer says, that of all who came to Ilion, he was the best man in ordering and marshalling armies. We accordingly cannot be reproached for what we now say." "My Athenian friend," Gelon answered, "it would seem that you have many who lead, but none who will follow. Since, then, you will waive no claim, but must have the whole, it is high time that you hasten home and tell your Hellas that her year has lost its spring." The significance of this statement was that Gelon's army was the most notable part of the Greek army, just as the spring is the best part of the year. He accordingly compared Hellas deprived of alliance with him to a year bereft of its spring. After such dealings with Gelon, the Greek envoys sailed away. Gelon, however, feared that the Greeks would not be able to overcome the barbarian, while believing it dreadful and intolerable that he, the tyrant of Sicily, should go to the Peloponnese to be at the beck and call of Lacedaemonians. For this reason he took no more thought of this plan, but followed another instead. As soon as he was informed that the Persians had crossed the Hellespont, he sent Cadmus, son of Sithus, a man of Cos, to Delphi with 350-oared ships, bringing them money and messages of friendship. Cadmus was to observe the outcome of the battle, and if the barbarians should be victorious, he was to give him both the money and earth and water on behalf of Gelon's dominions. If, however, the Greeks were victorious, he was to bring everything back again. This Cadmus had previously inherited from his father the tyranny of Cos. Although the tyranny was well established, he nevertheless handed the government over to the whole body of Coans of his own free will. This he did under no constraint of danger, but out of a sense of justice, and then he went to Sicily, where he was given by the Samians the city of Zancla, which he colonized and changed its name to Messina. This is how Cadmus had come, and it was he whom Gelon now sent because of his sense of justice. What I will now relate was not the least of the many just acts of Cadmus's life. He had in his possession great wealth entrusted to him by Gelon, and might have kept it. He nevertheless would not do so, but when the Greeks had prevailed in the sea fight and Xerxes had headed home, Cadmus returned to Sicily with all that money. There is, however, another story told by the Sicilians. Even though he was to be under Lacedaemonian authority, Gelon would still have aided the Greeks had it not been for Tyrolus, son of Crinippus, the tyrant of Himera. This man, who had been expelled from Himera by Theron, son of Anicedemus, sovereign ruler of Acragas, at this very time brought against Gelon 300,000 Phoenicians, Libyans, Iberians, Lygii, Elisci, Sardinians, and Sirnians, led by Amilcus, son of Anon, the king of the Carchedonians. Tyrillus had induced him to do this partly through the prerogative of personal friendship, but mainly through the efforts of Anaxius, son of Critines, tyrant of Rhegium. He had handed over his own children as hostages to Amilcus, and brought him into Sicily to the help of his father-in-law, for Anaxius had as his wife Tyrollus's daughter Sidipe. Accordingly Gelon sent the money to Delphi, because he could not aid the Greeks. They add this tale too, that Gelon and Theron won a victory over Amilcus the Carchedonian in Sicily on the same day that the Greeks defeated the Persians at Salamis. This Amilcus was, on his father's side, a Carchedonian, and a Syracusan on his mother's, and had been made king of Carchedon for his virtue. When the armies met and he was defeated in the battle, it is said that he vanished from sight, for Gelon looked for him everywhere but was not able to find him anywhere on earth, dead or alive. The story told by the Carchedonians themselves seems to have some element of truth. They say that the barbarians fought with the Greeks in Sicily from dawn until late evening; so long, it is said, the battle was drawn out, during which time Amilcus stayed in his camp offering sacrifice and striving to obtain favourable omens by burning whole bodies on a great pyre. When he saw his army routed, he cast himself into the fire where he was pouring libations on the sacrifice. He was consumed by this, and was not seen any more. Whether he vanished, as the Phoenicians say, or in the manner related by the Carchedonians and Syracusans, sacrifice is offered to him, and monuments have been set up in all the colonist cities, the greatest of which is in Carchedon itself. End of Volume 3, Part 7.